On today's show, we continue our Houston Rockets draft profile series, focusing on the electric guard out of Kentucky, Rob Dillingham. We're going to target his strengths, his weaknesses, potential NBA player comps, projected draft range, his Houston Rockets fit, and so much more. It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That's the best way you can help our show out, is to just even go comment, go Rockets, in the YouTube comment section. Helps us out a ton. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether you're on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for being an everydayer. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, NBA draft enthusiast, and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Madison Moore. You can track down on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Here as we continue our Houston Rockets draft profile series, today focusing on Kentucky's Rob Dillingham, the electric scoring guard. And there's a lot of upside when you think about Rob Dillingham offensively, what he could potentially bring to this Houston Rockets team. We're going to unpack who he is as a player on today's profile. Now, if you missed it, our last profile we did on Zachary Reese, so be on the lookout for that. Go check that out if you missed it. Madison, the way we start these things off, man, give us your initial thoughts, your elevator pitch on Rob Dillingham, the player.
Yeah, so Rob Dillingham, the elevator pitch is this is a electric point guard that is a score-first point guard with electric shot creation, extreme creativity, and extreme quick twitch ability. With his handle. And not only is he an incredible scorer, but he also makes others better. He's also a very good passer out of the pick and roll. He's able to make all the passes in the book, but he is an undersized guard. He clocks in at about 6'1", and he has a small wingspan as well as 6'3", at 6'3" wingspan, which limits him defensively. But it doesn't detract from this incredible offensive talent that gives him really a very high upside as a creator and an offensive initiator and scorer for NBA teams. So he's really a polarizing prospect that is a fan favorite because of the way he gets his buckets in a variety of different ways, using creativity, ball handling skills, shooting, and driving to the rim. This is a 3-level scorer with playmaking ability. We just have question marks about his defense.
Yeah, he clocks in at about 164 pounds. So, I mean, the dude is, very slight of frame, if you will. And that could be one of the downsides, right? And one of the things that maybe holds him back at the next level as guys get bigger, stronger, more physical, all that stuff. Now, not to say that we haven't seen guards that are, more thin, nimble, whatever you want to call it, excel at the next level, but it is going to be a barrier and something that he's going to have to overcome, not only offensively when it comes to how opposing teams guard him, but also defensively, right? Our team's going to be able to pick on him, or they're going to take advantage of his size, all that stuff. Some of the same concerns that you might even be able to argue for Reed Sheppard, right? The size, the height, the wingspan, all those same concerns can also be applied to Rob. There's also some eccentricities defensively that we'll get to here in a second. But yeah, man, I mean, first off, he's an exciting player to watch play. He's an absolute bucket getter, true 3-level scorer, can play on or off ball, right? Very willing to adapt his role as necessary. And we're seeing him become a better playmaker kind of by necessity. And that's was the interesting about his role at Kentucky, is not only was he the sixth man, bucket getter, lightning in a bottle guy coming off the bench, but he also ran the offense pretty well, right? Averaged just under 4 assists a game, a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, did all that in about 23 minutes a night. Like, that's a pretty good, if he was just a bucket getter, he'd still be an incredibly enticing prospect. But you add in the idea that he can also create for others and understands how to leverage his own shot creation ability, his own scoring ability into opportunities for his teammates. simple wraparound passes, simple pick and roll reads that he's able to make already as a freshman. Really exciting stuff that you think you can kind of build upon and, project him to be. I don't know if this is the issue. Is I don't know whether his true ceiling is as a primary number one offensive initiator, or if his ceiling is more of a dynamic sixth man off the bench instead of your prototypical like bucket getting sixth man, if that makes sense.
And that's the crux. It's what level offensively can Rob Dillingham reach at a consistent level where it makes up for his size and defensive limitations. Is this guy going to be a Trae Young level creator and scorer at the 3 levels? Or is he just lightning in a bottle and only able to kind of generate that type of prowess in stretches, right? It is about the consistency. Can Rob do this consistently at the next level? And I think that lies the question. And it's tied to his draft stock, right? And so I think for Rob, when you look at his strengths, yes, this guy is undersized, but he has incredible lightning quick first step, and he patterns that into his handle. So his handle is, I think it's incredibly good. One of the most creative handles we've seen in the process. I mean, this guy, he can pull out all the moves.
He has the ball on a string for sure.
Yeah, he really has it. He really has it on the string. And what's great about it is not only is he lightning quick, but he makes everything look the same. So he's able to get to different spots on the floor very easily because of that. And he pairs that with an incredible shooting stroke, and he can shoot it as a catch and shoot guy, like you said, off the dribble, but also, off the catch, but also as a shot creator, pulling out step backs. He actually has this move where you think he's going to drive to the rim. He's loading up for a first step, and he'll just pull up in your face. But that initial action in you being the threat of his burst really freezes guys and allows him to get his shot off. And his shot is very quick. He has a very quick trigger. I would be worried about him getting his shot off against NBA level wings and with their size. But because he pairs it with all these different moves and creation, I really don't have a problem with it and how quick he gets it off. But that just goes to show like the level of offensive creator he is. But like you said, he did this off the bench, and he played with a lot of good guards at Kentucky that were able kind of to balance his wild nature out, right? Reed Shepherd is the ultimate balancing act. So they really kind of hid a lot of the things that these type of prospects, these lightning in the bottle prospects, a lot of their weaknesses, he had guys to kind of mellow him out, to not let him get too high or too low. And I think it really resulted in a very, very high efficient season for him. I wonder if he was on another team, we may have a better clue if this guy's more Trae Young or off the bench guy, if he led his own team like Trae Young did at Oklahoma. But instead, he played off a bench in this role, and he was able to access this lightning in the bottle whenever he had it. And it produced really good numbers and really efficient numbers, but it makes it a bit more harder to kind of project as an NBA prospect.
Some of those numbers, he averaged 15.2 points per game, just under 60% true shooting. He was 44% from downtown on 4.5 attempts per game. So good sample size there. Hit almost half of his catch and shoot opportunities from long distance. So that's him kind of playing off ball, other guys setting him up, as well as, again, his own ability to be able to create create his own opportunities himself. I'm very curious because it feels like he has a really volatile range of outcomes, right? Where like the top end outcomes are very different from some of the bottom tier outcomes of him as a player. I can't wait to get to some of our comps here in just a second, as well as we got to talk about some of the downsides to his game, some of the areas that he would need to improve on to really actualize and realize his full potential as an NBA player. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. The Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It's the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more players' stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. With Prize Picks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. And if you're looking for promos, Prize Picks has you covered every single week, from lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays, which increases your chance of getting a win, to getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Friday. So if you're thinking about getting into daily fantasy sports, give Prize Picks a chance. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the Prize Picks app and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. And you might be asking yourself, if you're watching on YouTube, Jackson, why in God's name are you wearing a tank top on the show? It's because we sat down to record this and I went, Madison, are you wearing a tank top? And he goes, is that okay? And I said, yeah, it's okay. And I was like, I'll go switch into a tank top too. Problem is, I don't have my chain on, so that's my. I'm part of. Remember during the season when they were talking about near the end of the year, Craig Ackerman and Ryan Hollins talking about the no chain gang for the team.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I'm part of the no chain gang over here. Like I need to get myself a chain. No, all right. Anyways, let's continue. So Rob Dillingham, incredibly exciting offensive prospect, right? A lot of upside to his playmaking ability. The willingness that he showed to grow and to adapt into a role where he was more responsible for some of the shot creation for his teammates and generating offense for Kentucky as a whole shows promise that he is adaptable in his role, that he's capable of changing his play style. And that speaks volumes about a player's willingness and ability to develop over time, I should say. So a lot of upside offensively for sure. Defensively is where I think we're going to have some concerns here because, again, we talked about his slight frame, right? So 6'1", 6'3" wingspan, only, weighs under $170, right? That's not great numbers there. And I do think that when you look at some of the other guards in the NBA landscape in today's game, the guards who are, 6'2", 6'1", the undersized guards, if you will, one, they're either absolutely completely offensive phenoms, right? Like they dictate the game offensively, which is why you can kind of live with what they aren't defensively, or you have to try and hide them defensively. Hell, we can use here's like the tier one crazy option is Steph Curry is not a great defender, right? Steph Curry can be, taken advantage of defensively. The Warriors for years have had to hide him defensively and, built their entire defensive scheme around, hey, let's make sure that Steph doesn't get picked on because of his size. Trae Young is another one, right? Maybe an older reference, but like Lou Williams, another one, right? Former Houston Rocket. So the other guards, though, in today's NBA landscape that are only, 6 foot, 6'1", whatever, they're stronger at their size because they're kind of stout and physical, right? You can think of like the Jalen Brunsons, the Chris Pauls of the world, right? These guys are undersized, but they're really physical defenders, high IQ guys on that side of the floor. So they make up for their lack of their physical limitations defensively by either being high IQ defenders or just being really tough, physical, gritty defenders. Hell, even a Patrick Beverley type, right? Mm-hmm. Just a nuisance, a pest on that end. And that's where I think Rob Dillingham's going to have the hardest adjustment is defensively at the NBA level.
Yeah, at 163, that is high school level weight. And when coming into the league with grown men, he's definitely going to get targeted. I mean, he's going to be able to get targeted all down the lineup. You definitely don't want to switch with Rob right now. There's some real issues in him growing into his NBA body. And it's not just going to show up defensively. It also shows up on film offensively. When guys are able to stay with Rob Dillingham, and guys do stay with him at times. Yes, he's electric. Yes, he's able to create these advantages. But when guys actually stay with him, they very easily knock him off his spot. Right? They knock him off his spot. They can almost push him out. You see a lot of clips where Rob is like falling out of bounds and trying to make this incredible play, incredible pass, which he does make at times. But you can tell when the physicality really ratchets up at the next level, and when guys are better defensive, when he has better defensive matchups. I mean, can you imagine Thompson holding Rob Dillingham with that lateral quickness and strength, able to stay with him step by step? I mean, he even talked about that when he was talking about OTE with the Thompson twins, able to actually really guard him, but also at 6'7". He's going to experience those type of athletes and those type of guys who are able to mitigate a lot of his pace with their strength. We've seen Jalen Green go through it his rookie year where he could just get pushed out of bounds by Jimmy Butler, right? And I expect a lot of those same
and
things. And
Jalen's a whole 4 or 5 inches taller too.
Exactly.
He's got a body that you can envision. We talk about this a lot with players is, imagining, okay, what are they going to look like when their body fills out, when they grow into their NBA body, whatever. When you look at Rob Madison, realistically, what do you think his upper end outcome is after he spends 5 years in the NBA level? Do you think he gets up to 180, 185? Like, is that pushing it? Like, can he add 20 pounds of muscle. Like I think that's crazy.
I think he probably will get up to 180. I think he can add 25 years down the line, right? It still is a 19-year-old kid. They haven't grown into their bodies. And you don't want him to pack on it too much strength because you don't want it to limit
offset some of it. Exactly.
His electric nature that allows him to be such a force offensively. But it's really about getting stronger. You know what I mean? He really has to be able to get stronger to hold himself on the court. And guys do it. We see Trae Young able to, stay on the floor. We've seen Allen Iverson. I think Allen Iverson also has a very similar body set. He probably was a little bit taller, but I think they're pretty similar in size. And that guy is able. And one thing that I think Rob has on his side is Rob is not averse to contact. Rob, as one of his strengths and weaknesses, Rob often goes all the way to the basket. He has a floater in his game, but he likes to finish through contact. He likes to put that shoulder into you and try and finish over your outstretched arms. And sometimes that can be a little bad for him. And it shows up on the film where you see these wild try and finishes where he throws it over the backboard, but also he makes a lot of those. But I think it's good for a small guard to at least not be scared of the contact and at least try and finish through. And I think he uses his body in a good way. But with his electric nature and lightning in the bottle nature, we want him to pick those spots a lot better moving forward.
And I know the physicals are one thing. Defensively, it's not like for lack of effort though is the other thing, because he tries. Like his effort is on like 11 at all times, and sometimes though that's a bit of a downside, right? Like one of the comps I could make here is like kind of Russell Westbrook-esque in just how sometimes that energy can be really good, and that's like a kind of a chaotic energy, but then other times just like, what are you doing, man? Like be in the right spot, make the right rotation, and that's gonna like the defensive fundamentals definitely need to be ironed out to where he understands, hey, like just because you're trying to help or working really hard or moving really fast doesn't mean you're doing good things defensively. So there is a little bit some erratic nature to his defensive tendencies that need to be worked on a little bit. Let's get into some of your comps that you have for Rob though. So the way we do this, right, are low end, mid tier, and high end comps. So let's start with the low end like we always do.
Yeah, so low end comps, and this entails why Rob is such a polarizing guy, because his low end comps I think are pretty low. We got Jeremy Pargo. So Jeremy Pargo.
Oh, that's a deep cut. Oh my God.
Man. So Jeremy Pargo actually was a really good player and a serviceable player, but this lightning in a bottle off the bench that could win you a game. Jeremy Pargo won Lakers some games off the bench, including playoff games. A really, really smart player, had a lot of talent, but he could only get on the floor when he was hot because he didn't offer much in the rest of his game. Also, another guy, Nate Robinson. So Nate Robinson I like as a comp, not because of not so much play style. I think they get in and out of their jump shots. A lot of off the dribble jump shots is really where they're similar, but the volatility, this creative nature, this creative flashiness that can sometimes be a little bit too much for the teams, and it doesn't balance out for you to be the most consistent player you needs to be, right? And so if that lightning in the bottle of creativity is just a little bit too much to bottle up, guys might use him in that off the bench role in a Nate Robinson type way. And lastly, for our Rockets fans, I always keep a Rockets comp on us, Aaron Brooks. I think Aaron Brooks is a really good comp. Great shooter, able to get to the basket with his speed. I think they do a lot of the same things. I think Dilly's a bit of a better passer, but let's say that passing doesn't come through in a real way and the consistency is not in a real way. I think Aaron Brooks is a really good low-end comp for him.
I like the Aaron Brooks comp a lot. Rockets fan favorite Aaron Brooks. If you, dude, first off, just as quick aside here, he was never the same after that injury where he was trying to get up at half court, and then was it Manu? I think that somebody fouled him at half court, and he had the injury, and he was just never the same after that against the Spurs. Really tragic into what was. It wasn't the end of his career, but it was the end of who we thought Aaron Brooks was becoming, because he had a couple really impressive years with the Rockets. Yeah, I mean, hell, they handed him the keys. They were ready for him to be the starting guard. He was Daryl Morey's guy for a little bit there. All right. Let's get to the mid tier.
But that's what goes with these smaller guys. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes they have an injury and they don't have the size to bounce back when they lose a bit of their burst and a bit of, you know what I mean?
If you are that undersized, that small, whatever, and all you have going and what you have going for you is that 99th percentile burst, if suddenly you fall to 95th percentile, 90th percentile, whatever, and you're on the same tier as guys who are bigger, stronger, longer, tall, whatever, then suddenly it becomes a big problem because you don't have that advantage anymore. Absolutely.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and jump into these median outcomes. So I have the Kings, Isaiah Thomas, the guy coming off the bench for Boogie, shooting it at a very high level, using his burst to get up anywhere on the floor. I think their offensive packages are very similar, and they both have size issues, although Rob is bigger than him. Okay, so I think that's a really good one. We also had Lou Will. You mentioned him earlier. I think Lou Will is a good comp for him. I think the way Lou Will just provided instant offense off the bench, but really never could add enough of his game, enough defense to his game to be a starter and hold up as a starter, but still could run an offense off the bench, could really give you instant offense and run an effective pick and roll, which I think Rob is very good at doing.
And I think the most underrated skill for Lou Williams was his body control, right? Like he would seek out contact, initiate contact, but he knew that he wasn't strong enough or big enough to finish through contact. But what he would do is he would initiate the contact and then bounce off of defenders, right? He had that patented drive, and then whether it was going left, going right, didn't matter. Seek out the contact, drop the shoulder into a guy, fade away, and had enough touch to be able to get the ball, to get the shot off. So many and ones that we saw make just that exact way. So that I love the Lou Williams comp because when I was watching Rob, I was like, this guy is Lou Williams. Let's go.
Yeah, no, he really is. And Lou and J.R. Smith have this ability to, like, their shot doesn't look the same every time because they have this creativity. They shoot off balance. They get this
really
ball
unorthodox ways to finish the shot. But they get it in the bucket, and that's all that matters.
It in the bucket. And Rob has that too. Like, there's oftentimes where Rob just looks, his legs are flailing in the air. He's leaning to the right. Rob has a lot of that in his game, and it's like, ooh, that's a crazy finish. But that's the type of electric scorer that Rob is. But moving on. Jason Terry is another guy that I think if he's able to calm his game down in a way and put on a championship team where his role is focused, he knows what he has to do, he can be a very effective player in the right role. And I think Jason Terry is a perfect example of just a great shooter who could start for you, who could come off the bench, but just was a key part of a playoff team, a championship team. I think if Rob really gets his talent together and kind of irons it out, Jason Terry is a good comp for him. Okay, and so let's move on to the high end. I got 3 high ends for you guys. Okay, so I know I said Isaiah Thomas, but that's why I put the preface for Kings Isaiah Thomas.
Okay.
High end
Boston Isaiah Thomas. Okay.
I love Isaiah Thomas. I think his offensive package is so similar to Rob Dillingham. That's really the upside for Rob Dillingham. And also, when Isaiah Thomas was in Boston, I know it was a lot made of the shooting. When you watch those games, nobody could stay in front of Isaiah Thomas. He was lightning fast, using in and out of his change of pace, his hesitations. And those are a lot of the things that Rob Dillingham can weaponize on guys and how he gets everywhere on the floor. So that Boston Isaiah Thomas with a little bit more passing chops, I think
people might not remember Boston Isaiah Thomas was a 2-time All-Star, back-to-back years. He was, I think the second year, it was either the first or second year, he finished like top 5 in MVP voting one of those seasons. Yeah. Like he was up there, right? He
led Boston to the playoffs. Yeah. He led Boston to the playoffs. He was their best player. When Tatum and Brown were young bucks, rookies and stuff. He was their leader, and he was putting up 25, 30 a game. That dude was incredible. So I really think that is the type of outcomes. I think he really has that ability to reach that level. And it's just, unfortunately, Isaiah Thomas also went through an injury that he never got that burst back and never was the same player. And that's the gamble you make with these guys. Now, their margin for error is so slim. But another guy, one of my favorites is Kemba Walker. I think the way he gets in and out of his crossover moves and parries those into jump shots, I think if he steadies out his offensive game a bit more, I would really like Kemba Walker, the way that Kemba Walker gets to the basket, finishes well at the basket. I think they offer a lot of the same things. I really like Kemba Walker as an outcome for him. And lastly, a lot of people talk about this outcome for him, and it's Darius Garland. Okay, so Darius Garland, lightning in a bottle. I think Darius Garland is very real for him, not just because of the offensive package, right? I think Rob is a bit more wild at times, but he has the pace, the passing. He has the passing package that Darius Garland can, and he has the beginnings of that where you can see that really develop in a real way, where he's a high-level passer, able to get everybody else involved, and also hold up just enough on defense to leverage the rest of those offensive talents and really become a very effective player.
I like the Garland comp, like aesthetically, just everything that they can do offensively. It just throw like the Garland comp though, right? Because Garland is about 30 pounds bigger than he is right now. Now, granted, again, Garland's been in the league for 5 seasons now. He's had time to bulk up a little bit, but at the same time, like I think that like the size and the weight is definitely going to be an element of like if you told me if Rob was 15 pounds heavier than he is right now, and you could envision him adding another 10 to 15 pounds of muscle over time, getting up to 190, 195, staying at 6'1", I'd be like, all right, you know what? Cool. He's not going to be a complete target defensively. He'll still be able to hold his own situationally, but it's the size that is a little bit concerning. But I like these comps, man. There's a lot of insane offensive upside with a lot of these comps. That's what we've been talking about all episode, though, is that's not going to be the issue for him. But we got to envision what could this look like if he did join the Houston Rockets. What would his fit look like with this Rockets team? We've also got to get to his projected draft range. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, chatting about Kentucky's Rob Dillingham. Now, Madison, I've seen mocks where Rob is like all the way down in the late lottery, and I've seen mocks where he goes top 3. Like it's really volatile with him. He has a very legitimate chance to be the first guard taken in this draft. And we've talked about it before. It's an eye of the beholder draft, but I do think offensive upside, he probably has the most star power of the guards, right? Like potential star power of any of the guards in this draft.
He's the best creator. Let's just say that he's the most advanced creator in this draft, and that makes him closer to his upside than a lot of other guys. And when you think about the draft, the way I think about the draft is you can't just consider a guy's upside. You have to consider how close they are to that upside and also the downsides. What if these things don't hit in that 90th percentile way? What does this player look like? And that speaks to the volatility of his draft stock. Because if he doesn't hit these higher end comps, even if he's closer, you may be staring down a Jeremy Pargo on your team, or Aaron Brooks on your team. And then also, when you consider the injury history of smaller guards of this ilk and their inability to bounce back, we just named about 3 guys in Isaiah Thomas. Kemba Walker also is another guy. Once he had that injury, was never the same. The margin for error for the electricity they play with really limits their upside. You may not get 7-8 years of prime these guys. You might get 3 to 4. And what does that look like if you're an NBA evaluator, right? A draft evaluator. So even though this guy has such these great high upsides, right? You have to take into consideration what this guy looks like if he doesn't reach those. And, do you want to spend your number 1 pick on a Lou Williams? You know what I mean? Do you want to spend it on a Jason Terry? Do you want to spend it on a possible Jeremy Pargo? Or are you buying all in? And that's the thing. If that guy goes into the top 10, I think the person that picks him in the top 10 is really betting hard on him becoming that Darius Garland, that Kemba Walker, or that Isaiah Thomas.
Now, the other side of this thing is when you think about what his fit would look like on this Rockets team, we know that Ime is a defense-first guy. We know that he loves his defense. We know that he loves switching. You cannot do that with a guy like Rob. Like you would be barbecue chicken defensively if you tried to switch Rob onto guys that are bigger, stronger than him. He's got a long way to go defensively to get to a place where he's even a net neutral on that side of the floor. If he can get to that point, he might be the type of player where his offensive production has to outweigh the fact that he might be a net negative defensively throughout his career. We've seen, and not to say that he can't still have a successful career doing that. There are plenty of players that you're just like, hey, we know we're going to lose defensively when we put this player in the game, but he brings us so much offensively, we're willing to give up 15 points on that, and if he gives us 25 on the other end, like that's kind of the trade-off that you're willing to make. And it's tough because you already have one guard who is a little undersized, who is a little slight of frame already in Jalen Green. Are you willing to add another one? Could you envision like a backcourt of Rob Dillingham and Jalen Green does not inspire a ton of defensive confidence. Now, on the flip side of that, I will say that the Rockets have a lot of pieces that you could envision a team where if they are bought in on Dilly's upside, like they have plenty of pieces to mask his defensive deficiencies, right? Like you could have a backcourt of Rob and Amin Thompson, right? And then you've got your wings with Tari and Jabari, and you can put enough length and size around him that maybe you can get away with him not being the best on the defensive side of things.
Of course, yes. I mean, that would have to be the sell for Rob, but to me, that's a tall order, a tall sell for this Rockets team. I will have Rob a lot higher on my board as in general than for the Rockets. And it's for those reasons there as well. And also our best players, Alperen Sengun, which is another guy that has defensive questions, even though I think he's answered a lot of them. You know, you don't want to have to be compensating for multiple players in your starting lineup. And then when you add,
you can, from a team building perspective, you can probably compensate for one guy defensively. Like you can afford one. And again, that one guy better be bringing it offensively if you're if you're trying to compensate or if you're trying to scheme around whatever, you know, perceived defensive deficiencies there are. That one guy better bring it offensively. And so Sengun checks that box, right? Can Rob get to a level where he warrants that level of team building around him or incorporating him into at least a starting role? And that's why, to me, it's really hard to see a world where Rob is a long-term NBA starting caliber player. He would have to hit that like that AI Boston Isaiah Thomas peak, whatever, for him to warrant being an NBA starting caliber player. And that's fine. You could still be an electric sixth man. And that to me is probably his long-term NBA role.
And I think this is important to say, though, also, even though Rob is very good off ball, he would come to this Rockets team and play with a lot of guys that need the ball in their hands to be successful, like Jalen Green, like Alperen Sengun. And when we talk about what you're giving up on defense, in order for Rob to honestly get that offensive value, that punch that you really need, he probably needs the ball in his hands. Even though he can still be good and serviceable off ball, right? In order for you to get that high-end outcome, that guy's usage is gonna need to go up, especially if you want him to develop in the NBA system, right? And so for him to even return that type of value, you have to take the ball out of some of the guys' hands that are probably already better than him at that right now. And that's the real crux of Rob with the Houston Rockets, right?
It kind of feels like it's very similar. Again, we only saw a half season of it, right? But Lou Williams in a Rockets jersey played alongside James Harden, right? Lou was not the best version of himself playing alongside James Harden because guess what? The ball was in James's hands and Lou could still be serviceable. And when James went to the bench, absolutely, he put the ball was back in Lou's hands. He played the way that he knew how to play best. But he could still be a catch and shoot threat on the perimeter, but that wasn't his game. That wasn't him at his best. And that's kind of the idea of like, if you were to put Rob and like Jalen Green in a backcourt together, like, yeah, they could each take turns, but then it's a disservice to both of them because right now, at least what we know about Jalen Green here 3 years into his career and what we know about Rob as a prospect and how we're kind of projecting the translation of his skills to the NBA level, both of them need the ball. They can both be used off ball, but that's not where their strengths lie.
Exactly. And not just Jalen. We don't have to use Jalen. We can use Cam Whitmore and his development off ball. We want him to be our sixth man. We're trying to develop Amin Thompson as a point guard, right? You know what I mean? He's going to have, and then also Alperen Sengun is going to command a lot of touches and running this offense. To me, for him to bring back that value for this particular team, he would need to have the ball in his hands a lot. And there's just a lot of mouths to feed, with initiating this offense right now and developing other guys on this team. And although I do think he is a good off-ball offensive player, I don't think he can reach those heights to net that value to offset his defense. And I don't know if I want to draft a Lou Williams at number 3. You know what I mean? I want a guy.
Selfishly, I just want him to go to a team where he can just cook for 30 plus minutes a night. Let him go to a bad team. Let him let the Wizards take him or something. Let the Pistons take him. Whatever. I mean, Pistons have Cade, so it's a little bit tougher. Hornets have LaMelo, so it's like let him go to a team that doesn't have an established primary ball handler. And just let him cook for 30 plus minutes a night. Just because I'm really curious to see what he could actually be if you give him unfiltered access to the offense and just say, go do your thing. And like, can he get to a place where he's doing, 20-7, 20-8, maybe not as a rookie right out of the gate, but
rookie, yeah.
but I think that's kind of his upper end outcome. And then again, can you ever get to a point where your team can build a winning team with that as like your number one or number two option? That's the big question mark with Rob. So from a fit perspective, I'm right there with you. I'm much lower on Rob, even though I like him as a player.
Rockets,
I do.
yeah.
I'm much lower on him for the Rockets for all the reasons that we've illustrated in today's show. Madison, though, you know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at, man.
Man, you can come catch me on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Come talk Rockets basketball and NBA draft.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, a 5-star review helps us out a ton. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.